Hello, everyone. This is Michael here. Before we get into the episode, I just wanted to thank all of the chasers who wrote in with their stories and their anecdotes. We really, really appreciate it. We weren't able to get to all of them in this episode just because there were a lot and we really like to talk about them. But we're going to address the ones that were left out in next week's episode. So stay tuned for not a full part two. We'll have a different full topic next week, but we'll definitely catch up and make sure that everybody was included. So thank you very much and enjoy.
Hello and welcome to the Big Fat Gay Podcast, where we talk about the things that are weighing on our minds. My name is Dan Oliverio. I'm a chubby chaser, author, public speaker, and today I'm a happy chaser because it's a lovely day, it's Christmas time, and we're going to talk about all things chaser.
Yeah.
Yay. I'm Trevor Keyson. I'm a super chub, and I guess today I'm a jolly chub because like Dan said, it's Christmas time. And I'm actually freezing today.
You are in the coldest room of the house, honey.
Yes.
It is literally the coldest room. Mm-hmm. I get it. My name is Michael. I am a chaser as well. And today I'm a cozy chaser. I'm bundled up in my flannel pants and my big oversized sweatshirt and sipping on some cocoa. It's a good day.
My name is Don Marshall. I'm a big chubby guy living in sunny Hollywood, and today I am an ambivalent chaser because I am neither hot nor cold. It's just right in my house. I guess I'm the Goldilocks chub. There you go.
That doesn't sound ambivalent. That sounds comfortable.
Did I say I was a chaser by accident?
Yes.
You did.
Can I retake that?
Sure. Nope.
We're chasers on the brain.
Yeah.
It's done. It's locked in vinyl.
God damn it.
Moving forward. Oh. How's everybody doing? It's the weekend. Hooray. Work is over. Sort of.
Yay.
But not really.
Welcome, everybody, to your weekend. Oh, no, now it's Wednesday. Hi, everybody.
Yeah. You're already
Welcome to your Wednesday.
You're halfway there.
Well, we've got a really fun show today. I'm very excited for, but in true Big Fat Gay Podcast form, we're starting off with one of the, it's one of those, I appreciate that this is being reported, I guess, but
no, I hate this article. I hate every word of it.
It's pretty great. I don't know.
I love it. I think it's amazing.
Oh.
And this is one of those
Trevor,
things.
Why don't you?
Thank God for my little news aggregator thing, because that's the only reason I found this. It's from the New York Post. Amazing. A pillar of journalism.
Their editorial prowess is unmatched in the modern age.
That is actually a fair statement, Michael.
The headline is, "Why Prehistoric Men Were Into the Chubby Chaser Fetish, study."
which begins my hatred of the article. Chubby chasing is not a fetish.
Yes. It's full of, let's generously call it misguided statements.
Yes. And, when we link to this, I also have a link to the actual study, which was basically an observation of Venus figurines during the,
30,000 BC.
Yes. And basically they noticed that as...
to complete the picture, the meaning Venus figurines, meaning the Venus of Willendorf, these short sort of round female statues that showed very voluptuous, large, fat women.
Yes. But they noticed that these figurines got larger and more curvaceous during periods as there were advancing glaciers and falling temperatures, and there was food scarcity.
They had 200 of these pieces covering a range of about over almost 20,000 years. And so they drew this correlation between the size of the pieces and this 20,000 year period, saying, they got fatter as the world got colder and they went into an ice age and then got thinner again after the ice age ended.
Well, and the original hypothesis was that the figurines represented fertility, not insulation and fat storage. But, in a modern diet culture, That's how we would.
It was definitely put through a particular lens. You also find little gems like this hidden in the article. Quote, but those who the modern day fetish community now refer to as feeders or chubby chasers once had a much different reason behind their sex appeal.
And this is the kernel of my hatred for the article, because number one, calling it a fetish. Number two, aggregating feeders and chubby chasers as, pretty much the same thing.
It's interchangeable.
Yeah, they're just interchangeable for them. And what kills me is that the because it's we got to make it newsworthy. The point is, back in prehistoric times, there was a legitimate reason for liking fat women, whereas today it's just sick and fetishistic.
It does really come across that way. Yeah, it really comes across that way. And so that kind of brings up my question, because the article's full of this. It's
full of that. Yeah.
It's full of many things. Is there a way to report a story like this where it doesn't come across like that? Is there a way to? Is this just a flawed way to report, or is this never going to come across?
Well, it's designed to be clickbait. I think the more legitimate way to cover this, but it's not as interesting, is saying that these figurines may represent opulence or survivalism rather than fertility.
I have to praise these two particular sentences. Cold insulation wasn't the only reason that ancient people praised the lard. The Tubby talismans were also viewed as symbols of fecundity, as increased fat would provide a source of energy during gestation. But I just praise the lard and Tubby talismans.
Yes. Have I mentioned how much I hate this article?
I think we have an episode title.
Tubby talismans, I think, should be the episode.
I will bop anyone on the nose who calls me a Tubby talisman, by the way. I will thwap your nose like you're a bad fucking.
I think there's going to be guys rubbing your belly for 3 wishes. Yeah. Oh, see, you like that.
Come on, that's funny. I like it. Depends what sort of wishes they're making.
Exactly.
The New York Post continuing to forward the cutting edge of modern journalism.
Yes. At the front lines of backwardness.
So next up, I thought this was awesome. The headline we have here is plus size pole dancer teaches important lesson with this inspiring BGT routine. Britain's Got Talent, which is a video. It's an older video, but there's, I guess, been an update. She's in the news again.
Yes.
But if you haven't seen it, there's a Britain's Got Talent episode where this woman, this plus size, fat woman, does this pole dancing routine, which is fucking incredible. If you haven't watched it, it is awesome.
They did a kind of follow up with her, and she's modeling for a plus size clothing brand, but she also is she opened a studio called Emma's Pole Dancing, where she's teaching pole dancing. I mean, to everyone, but I also just think it's great for if someone is larger and wants to learn to pole dance, to be able to have a teacher who really gets how your body moves differently. Just, the gravity of that.
Yes, but also the additional friction and gripping power of having extra flesh.
Yes.
So there's a competitive pole dancing circuit. I know this because
yes,
I met my friend's fiance for the first time when she was participating in the world pole dancing competition.
Wow.
Which is sort of weird when, hi, so now I've just watched you fly 20 feet above the ground with your yoni flashing all over the place through your bikini. But there's a skill. At some point, we should do an outing to Jumbo's Clown Room here in LA. If you're unfamiliar with Jumbo's Clown Room, they're famous for their fully dressed pole dancing. And I thought it was going to be ridiculous. And then I walked in, and the shit these women were doing on the poles was shocking.
Are they clowns?
I actually gave them money. No, it's called Jumbo's Clown Room because they have portraits of clowns all around as the decor.
That certainly sets a vibe.
Oh, it really does. It is not an upscale place. Let's leave it at that. But yeah, if you're interested, check it out. It's a great little video, and the woman does an amazing performance.
I actually followed her on Instagram. She has an Emma Haslam. I don't think we've said her name yet. She has an Instagram channel. Yeah, it's very cool.
So I mentioned this last week. I wanted to do another kind of, I found 2 articles. This is a follow-up to last week's article from Tablet. And in honor of Hanukkah, there is kind of this article is a dive into Stephen Post, the man who organized the Fat Inn in Central Park, which we've mentioned before, I think maybe in the first season.
In 1967.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it kind of just, it talks about him, which I was, pleasantly surprised by, because I've heard the name. I knew about the Fat Inn. I know there was the New York Times article about it, in 1967, but it was just interesting seeing more about him.
Yeah, and being able to learn a little bit more about him. He's Jewish, which is the sort of tie into that Tablet article. But it is really fascinating to just see, again, like related to last week, you can start to see the origins of what we recognize now as the fat acceptance movement.
Mm-hmm. And I think the other thing that's interesting to note is today we very much think of body positivity and fat acceptance as by and for women. And, there's people like us who are on the air too and talking about it. But it's very interesting to look back into a lot of the origins. And, certainly there were a lot of women, but there are also a lot of men where it wasn't quite so segregated by gender. And Stephen Post organizing the Fat Inn in Central Park in 1967, Bill Fabre starting NAFA, the National Organization for the Acceptance of Fat. It was Fat Americans originally. I can't remember. What is it now, Trevor?
The National Association to Advance Fat Acceptance.
To advance fat acceptance. What I said was the original title back in 1969, when he was looking for a dress for his wife and couldn't find anything in the city of Rochester. Like not just nothing he liked, but no clothing in her size. Mm-hmm. And he's like, how can this be? So that started an organization. So there's a lot of history with this in all quarters, whether we're talking about Black women or white men or anywhere. So I think it's a good article if you're interested in the history of this stuff and where the various threads begin and how they weave together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This is a challenge to listeners. If you can stop fat oppression, we will stop doing this podcast. It is a simple task.
Is that a hostage threat?
It's a threat. If you can't stop fat oppression,
we're just going to keep releasing episodes every week.
And eventually it'll be twice a week.
Yeah.
And then every day. And then I'll lose my mind. So before we get to our main topic, it's
Lizzo Watch.
I knew it was Lizzo Watch.
Dan, how'd you know?
So kind of first up, there was this, it was first on TikTok, but then Lizzo shared it elsewhere. And it kind of comes from I feel like there's a different word for kind of TikTok memes. But basically, where people were taking audio from one TikTok and recreating videos, kind of showing their bodies and showing how different bodies look. And Lizzo did this in this really beautiful white bikini and just kind of thriving, jiggling, living her best life.
Is she dancing to something in particular or just moving?
It's just her showing off her body.
Mm-hmm.
Just as a quick aside, I clicked this link originally and the page didn't load on Instagram, but it's loading now. So if you have trouble getting to it, just keep trying. It's there. I promise.
Yes. And Lizzo also kind of acknowledged, she's been losing weight. She's been working out. And she says in this, my body is changing, but I'm going to keep appreciating it from every angle, which I think is good because I think, just so much in general of people fixating on their bodies and how their bodies are changing. And I think it is important to acknowledge the beauty of your body, regardless of the state it's in or of how it's changing.
Yeah. If it feels like you're in between points where you've found acceptance for your own body, whether it's at one end of the spectrum or you're working towards a different part and you're in that process of getting somewhere new, taking a minute to accept how you look in that in-between stage as well, is important, because when you start to change your perception of yourself and you say, oh no, I've decided I want to look like this now. Whatever work you did to accept where you were before can sometimes feel like it's getting written out or changed or undone. And I think what she's doing is good because she's trying to just remain always in the moment, no matter how she looks, and accept herself, which is a struggle. And it's not always something we can accomplish, as she has also been very honest about sharing in another video that she posted.
Yes. So she shared kind of a TikTok, basically talking about having negative thoughts about her body and kind of dealing with that and working through that, and acknowledging that, you know, as she is this pillar of body positivity, she gets a tremendous amount of harassment. That's, Lizzo left Twitter because she was just getting so much hate on there. And that, you know, as confident as she is, that these comments still get to her sometimes.
I will say it was an interesting experience for me. I know most people didn't see this way, but I saw these two things back to back. The video of her showing off her body, having pride, feeling strong, and then the video of her talking about feeling low that day. And I really appreciated that as somebody who knows what it's like to start off a day in one mode and finish it in another, or drift back and forth between both of those states over the course of several days, you know? And it's the sort of thing you don't hear often. I feel like we often portray people of size as existing at one point within that spectrum. Like, you either get to feel good about yourself or you always feel bad about yourself. And we don't acknowledge that we drift back and forth between them.
Well, and I would also say that oftentimes, even most of the time, that doesn't correspond to what your body looks like. It's because, for example, if you're up in one part of the day and down in another part of the day, it's not because you gained 50 pounds in the day or lost 50 pounds in the day.
Right.
And one of the things it reminds me of is, you know, if you're old enough to have a lot of photographs of yourself throughout your life, and you realize, wow, I was so much more X here, but I'm so much more Y now. And, you know, and you're down on yourself because Y is not what you wanted to be. But if you think about it, most people that I've talked to have this idea that, you know, you look at a picture of yourself when you were, let's say you want to be thinner, and there's a picture of you when you were 10 years ago when you were thinner. And you go, wow, I can't believe I looked like that. But then in the next breath you think, and at the same time back then, I thought I was so fat. Like, there's no appreciation. Like, it's only in hindsight that you're like, wow, I was never that fat. Or a lot of people have told me that they look at pictures from when they were kids and they remember feeling as kids that they were the fattest kid in the world from the world reacted to them. And they look at pictures later on. They're like, I was kind of a chubbier kid, but they weren't the monster that they imagined themselves to be. And that sometimes we carry around in our head this idea that our body is always wrong, no matter what we look like, even when we were 100 pounds thinner or 100 pounds heavier, that it's something we bring to it in the moment, and that, you know, we can be aware of that and interrupt the process.
Exactly. And seeing somebody as, again, she's such a high profile figure in this space, that seeing her acknowledge these things is really helpful. Like, a lot of times you just need permission to think or feel the way that you do, and whatever that might be, you just need to understand and have somebody that you respect tell you, yeah, that's okay. Like, it's actually okay. And that can get you through that moment. So on a more positive note. So one of Lizzo's makeup artists kind of revealed in an Instagram post his tip for kind of giving Lizzo that Lizzo glow, which is Glow Recipe Glow niacinamide.
Niacinamide. Yes.
Dewdrops.
Niacinamide, yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
I had heard of this product before, referenced somewhere online, and I almost got it because I was like,
Trevor, you already glow so much. You don't want to blind people.
I know. It's dangerous.
So we're going to do a big fat gay facial.
Yes.
Where we're all going. That didn't sound right, did it?
Or it sounded exactly right, Michael. Exactly.
Everyone just got really excited and then disappointed.
We're gonna have a big fat gay makeover. I think that's more of what I meant.
But maybe if you're looking for that last little stocking stuffer for someone, get them something from the Lizzo approved Watermelon Glow skincare line.
Well, that will take us into our follow-up from last week. So we wanted to talk to the chasers of the world, the chasers that listen to the show, the people that we know, and kind of get just this sort of wide-reaching set of experiences from the people that we know to try and help explore that chaser world, because it can kind of seem a little ambiguous sometimes. And I think the chaser experience is a lot of times somewhat isolated, at least from the other chasers, which is something that we found was pretty consistent. And so we talked to a few guys. We've come up with pseudonyms for each of them. So these aren't the real names. We just wanted to be able to refer to each of them in a way that would make sense for the people listening and for us also, because some of these answers were really thoughtful and in depth. And I think probably the easiest way to do this is just to kind of go in order from each of the guys that we talked to. Does that cover it? Should we dive in?
No, I think that's good. Yeah.
Dive on in.
Okay.
Dive.
All right. Diving away. So our first listener, Nate, as we've called him, answered. I think we had a couple questions that we started off as jumping off points. The first of which was, when did you first discover you were a chaser and how? And I thought this was funny because I think he's roughly my age, like he's millennial age. And he said he figured it out when he was about 13 or so. But the thing that really brought it to life for him was a website called Newgrounds, which has Flash games that you could play back in like the early 2000s. And he was playing a Flash game that featured the Numa Numa guy, which for any of you who like the Numa Numa guy, who's, I don't know that he's all that fat, but he's definitely probably the first fat viral person, the person to go viral.
I'm Googling it now.
I think we should drop in a clip of the music. And I think anyone who knows it'll flash in their mind. It will unlock that memory.
I just thought that was a funny way to kind of dig into that, because even though he and I grew up basically at the same time in the same way, that never really hit me the same. Like I saw the Numa Numa guy when he went viral, and it never really struck me like that. But I think it just goes to show like how many different points of, I don't know, influence can hit somebody's psyche in a different way, even if we're both chasers. And it was just, and his coming out story, he said it was kind of a non-issue for him. I mean, he came out as gay at the same time as he came out as a chaser. And it was, he said people mostly were focused on the gay part. It didn't really, but as we'll see, like later on, that's not universal.
No,
another chaser right in with a very different experience.
Right. And that's because the communities we come out in, they definitely, I think almost always care about gay or care about fat, one more than the other. And so in one place you come out as a gay chaser and they're like, oh my God, you like guys. And in another place you come out and they're like, oh my God, you like fat.
And I also wonder if it depends on how you see it yourself. Like what you are reflecting back out into the world is how the world perceives you to a degree. Like if like he seems like he's been fairly comfortable with it and has had, at least I know, has had a boyfriend for quite a long time. And I'm curious if that kind of self-confidence and outness helps just generally for other people to kind of accept it as you see yourself.
Well, and I think it's symbiotic. I agree with you, but it's also symbiotic because Don's talked about this, for example, that, how you feel about yourself is a reflection of how the community treats you, and how the community treats you is also a reflection of how you treat yourself. So yeah, there's no chicken and egg here. It's symbiotic.
Right.
So okay. Lance wrote in. I find him, I actually was very interested by his letter because the Gen Z experience of coming out is already something that's kind of foreign to me. And I'm a little jealous of it.
Yeah.
Like a lot of the Gen Z people I met didn't really have a formal coming out experience. They just sort of were gay. Not all of them, of course. But and that's an experience that, like, I'm a Gen Xer. Like, I can't even conceive of not having that coming out experience, as it's so defining to who I am now.
So I know, like, as a millennial, I mean, coming out was still a thing. And I feel like I came out freshman year of high school. I know some other millennials that, like, came out young, in 8th grade. But now I know like Gen Z kids, or, I guess young adults now, who came out in like when they were 8.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Well, I mean,
no, which I could have done. I knew I was gay when I was in kindergarten. I knew it. Like, that wasn't even a question. But for my age group, I think the idea of coming out before you were self-sufficient, like able to stand on your own 2 feet just in case your parents threw you out of the house. It wasn't even on the radar. Like, that, I never would have considered that.
I definitely had the coming out, the formal, sit down, come out experience in dealing with, for example, my father. But for my high school friends, because I was pretty much asexual in high school, which, another chaser down the line that we're going to talk about hits exactly how I felt, which is, I didn't know what sexuality I was. I wasn't sexual. And so going from that to being gay, for my high school friends, I didn't sit anybody down. I just started not censoring myself and started saying things like, oh, wow, he's hot. And they're like looking at me, looking at what I'm looking at, looking at me, looking at what I'm looking at. And it's like, oh, I think he's talking about that fat guy. and so I didn't sit anybody down. It was more of that, like, I just stopped stopping myself.
That's interesting. I think that's kind of a similar way of how I did it, where I never really came out, in quotes, as a chaser. I would say actually doing this podcast is about as close as I've come to sort of announcing I'm a chaser, literally saying those words to a bunch of people that but I think when I was sort of coming through my late teens and 20s, I had to come out as gay, and then I just dated the guys that I was interested in, and they were fat guys. And so people understood that that's who I was interested in, but I never really did the coming out process until, again, like, I think basically the start of this year.
Well, Lance talked about the experience. He gave us sort of the opposite experience of Nate, where he talks about, like, his coming out as gay was not that difficult. People were basically accepting. And then he brought his first boyfriend home to his parents, and they were kind of shocked and horrified at the fat, not at the penis. Which I think is pretty interesting. I feel like we've talked a little bit about the concepts of intersectionality already, and I feel like this is an external intersectionality where, okay, you like something 1 degree of separation from what I expect for you to like. You're gay or you're fat, right? And then when you like gay and fat, it's 2 degrees of separation from what people expect you to like. So maybe the reaction is more vehement. I don't know.
Well, and then when you get to the internalization, when you have internalized homophobia and then internalized fat phobia, or as, I talk about in my book, one guy told me, like, dear Lord, if you had to make me a faggot, how come you had to make me a faggot who likes fat guys? Where it's for a lot of chasers, it's just doubled because they can barely come out as, a lot of chubs have suffered really terrible chasers, and it's because the chaser can't deal with himself. And it often comes from that. They can barely handle being gay in some cases. And other people, like we're talking about here, they have, they handle gay. That's no big deal. A quarter of their friends are gay, not a big deal. But like, oh, you like fat guys. That's weird.
Yeah, I think it's funny because he does draw a bit of a difference, our Gen Z writer, Lance, where he says that it was his parents that they weren't super happy about him being gay, but it was really the fat thing that they were more upset about. But his friends were, on the whole, quite accepting.
Yeah.
And he has this little anecdote, which I think is hilarious. He said, hell, once when I brought this up to a straight friend, he admitted that he has, and I swear to God, I'm not making this up, quote, gotten really into the BBW tag on Pornhub, end quote.
And that's a great example of what we talked about in another episode where a lot, the question was, where are the chasers? And a lot of times the chasers don't know they're chasers. Like this guy looking at fat girls on a Pornhub site going, that's kind of hot.
I find it kind of interesting because, like, I find with most people I know, we're pretty open about porn. Like, we talk about porn. Like, it's, and the concept of, like, you have this entire secret life of porn that doesn't have to be secret. Like, if you talked about your pornography, you might discover you're not as alone as you thought you were.
Yeah.
Especially since, like, BBW is one of the biggest search terms in many states in the US,
I'm reminded of my mom watching Sex and the City and being horrified that these women are talking about sex with their friends, and, like,
who does that?
Who talks about sex with their friends? And it's everyone should.
It's healthy. It's literally a part of your primal existence. food, breathing, sleep, and sex. Like these are the 4 things we exist for on a physical level. And to try and hide that off from other people, it just doesn't seem healthy.
Well, yes, but remember that a lot of times there's the porn you're allowed to watch and the porn you're not supposed to like. And that is certainly the case with chubby chasers.
I mean, as we found, no matter how much you try to hide it, archaeologists are going to find it later.
Yes. Yeah, but you'll be dead.
Come on. Okay, so quick question. Who here at some point has had an agreement with a friend where if you get hit by a bus or something terrible happens, they're going to come over to your apartment and get rid of a secret stash in a closet somewhere, or clear out a cache in your computer, or
smash your phone.
Yeah.
It's, what's funny about that is I've never really, at least not since I lived at home when I was a child. Like that's a different story. But as an adult, I've never really had that worry because my sort of sexual attraction is so open already that like people know what I like. It's not the same as watching the porn that I watch, but it is so open at this point that like they wouldn't find anything that would be so surprising. I don't know, like it doesn't.
And you're going to be dead. Who cares?
It's the memory that counts. It's your legacy. What do you want people to remember you as? A porn monster?
I just have trouble envisioning me worrying about that from beyond the grave.
There's a lot of.
I think of it more as like back in the day. I thought of it more of protecting people near me rather than my own dead self-concern.
I don't know. I think there's a lot of horny, embarrassed ghosts out there.
Well, they haven't been able to pass on to the next life because their porn is still out there.
I'm curious if any of you have had the experience of being a young kid and finding your father's porn stash and then judging them because of it.
I had the opposite experience of having parents that like, how did you ever conceive me? There is no evidence you people even know what sex is. How did you ever make me, given that there was zero dialogue about sex. There was zero evidence of sex. There was zero interest in sex. It was like we were talking about a planet that hadn't been discovered.
Yeah, I think I have to say my experience was pretty similar to that. Maybe not quite as extreme, but definitely not really talked about, hinted at, alluded to, never found any porn stashes, search history. I mean, later in life, so I guess some of that stuff developed, but yeah, as a kid, never stumbled across that stuff. And I think the first time was me typing something like typing sex.com into the search bar on the internet when I was like 9. I think that was probably the first. And then like when I was a little older, in middle school, I think some friends of mine took me over to somebody's house to watch a porn that they had gotten their hands on. A porn. Isn't there a joke in Family Guy about saying it that way?
A porn, yeah.
Sometimes you got 2 porns.
It's a porno or porn. And that was really off-putting because, of course, it was disgusting. But I digress.
Well, it's funny. Like, I found a porn tape at a young age. It was all straight porn. It was called Swedish erotica. It was the line of porn.
Yeah.
And
because it's not dirty.
Okay, so Swedish. The first thing, I found it at a young age where like I was already interested in sex, but I hadn't. My orgasms were dry at that point, right? I hadn't quite gotten old enough for anything to happen with that. So the first time I saw semen was in a porno tape. And Mother of God, it was the most horrific, disturbing, what the ever-loving fuck is coming out of that person experience I ever had.
How old were you?
I'm not sure. I was really young. I'm guessing 9, 10, something like that.
Oh man.
I mean,
the other thing was I didn't guess that I was gay, even though I was more interested in the dudes than the women. All the dudes in the 70s porn were kind of no. There were a lot of Ron Jeremys back then.
Yeah.
I actually remember the first time there was a straight performer named Jerry Butler, and he was the first time I ever saw a pretty man in a porno, and that clinched a lot of things for me. Yeah.
Clinched, you say?
Yeah, that was what I was thinking.
Clinched repeatedly.
Yeah.
So our next response is a little more serious. So sorry to kind of bum you out when you're in your chortles here.
It's always a ride on the Big Fat Gay podcast.
But so Lance, is it Lance? Yeah. Lance was talking about kind of his parents' reactions and disapproval of the fat aspect of the boyfriend he brought home. And Alex kind of had a similar experience because he grew up fat. And he said, growing up, my family always made fun of me for being chubby. I'm not talking about a little teasing. It was full on mean and hurtful. I ultimately think that's what gave me body dysmorphia and made me feel more comfortable around larger people.
I should say that experience of being a fat kid is very common amongst chubby chasers.
Yes.
That was also part of my background. I was a fat kid and made fun of horribly for it.
Or even just the aspect of there being a very toxic environment around body culture in a household.
That was a little bit more mine. I was kind of in the middle because I certainly thought I was a fat kid, and I wasn't, like the white skinny kid, like that thing, like the skinny white kid. I wasn't that. And so because I wasn't that, I thought I was fat. And then, like Trevor was saying, the environment around how bodies and fat is talked about when I was growing up was not ideal.
I wonder if part of the chaser mentality contains like a desire for taboo. From the way you're describing it, it kind of sounds like that may be a factor.
I'm not sure it's a desire for taboo, but I will say that it can allow us to find kinship in taboo, which is what Alex is talking about. And I think it also becomes one of the things we have to get over about ourselves in liking that which is not, we're told is unlikable. And then having to get through that, not just about our own bodies, but then about our sexuality over, above and beyond just being gay. For straight chasers, there's a little bit, there's actually kind of a different arc. For them, it's kind of interesting because if you're a white, straight male FA, chubby chaser, you've never had the experience of coming out of a closet. You grew up in a world as a straight white man, you grew up in a world that was designed for you. And so then when you figure out that you like 300-400 pound women, all of a sudden you, for the first time in your life, you're inside this taboo that nobody knows about. And if you're gay, you might've had a practice run at this, like coming out as gay. But if you're a straight white guy, you have very little to hang your hat on as a way of overcoming this.
Alex has more to say, though.
Yes. He also talks about just kind of now this moment of body positivity and acceptance. How it's great to kind of see that we're in this moment of body positivity and body acceptance. But he also touches on watching Dan's True Life special and seeing himself kind of in the world and represented on TV.
That was actually the most gratifying thing about doing that show. MTV True Life. It certainly wasn't my show. I appear very briefly in it. It's about 3 fat people who are not trying to lose weight. That's the big surprise. The episode is called Happy to Be Fat. And I just show up as a second act love interest for one of the guys. But we got so many cards and letters about that. It continues to be one of the most viewed episodes in the history of this Emmy Award-winning documentary series, True Life. And it just changed people's lives to see themselves reflected, and that it didn't make chubby chasing some sort of craven, well, like the New York Post article we just talked about. Yeah. That makes an interest in fat people clearly at best perversion.
Right.
If not in fact abusive. So it was really an important thing a reason that I did it, and that apparently a lot of people got out of it.
Yes. Alex also had a similar experience to Lance, kind of he didn't come out as a chaser, and Alex is also kind of from the Chicago area, and I feel like there is this Midwestern thing where like, and I definitely get it, like, okay, so I came out once, I'm just going to show up and people are going to figure it out, and no one's probably going to say anything in the moment because it's the Midwest. There's that Midwest politeness.
Well, but I mean, I hear that from a lot of chasers. They say, like I'll say, are you out to your parents about being a chubby chaser? And they'll say, I don't know. I just keep bringing fat guys home. They probably figured it out by now.
Yeah, which I think is I don't know.
I'm just picturing every time he leaves the kitchen with his boyfriend, the parents just turn to each other and go, well, he's got a type.
Seriously, that's exactly what happens.
I mean,
Yeah.
with my mom and Dan,
Yep.
it wasn't until there was a time she was visiting and there was a photo album on the coffee table.
No.
And my mom was flipping through it. And like, then she had the eureka moment. And I was in the kitchen and she's like, oh. And I was like,
And she said,
Dan likes big boys. And I was like, well, yeah.
have you seen your son? Well, and there's that thing, and I've gotten the opposite of that, where people will say to me like, wow, it's so great that it doesn't bother you how big they are. Like I'm doing some sort of magnanimous gesture, not excluding fat guys from my repertoire. And I hasten to add, when people say that, it's like, no, I'm completely into how fat they are. I think that's a great thing. Like, because they want to give me some sort of credit for overlooking how fat they are. And I'm like, no, that's an important secret ingredient. Like, I'm not going to let that slide.
So our last writer got inspired, and I want to thank, first of all, thanks to everybody who wrote in with their responses and allowing their personal stories to be shared so that we can sort of talk about them. And this last one was quite long, and so we're going to sort of take it as we can, piece by piece. But suffice it to say, there's a lot of really interesting points with we've dubbed him Casey. For our last one, I need your help, guys, because there's so many different interesting parts of it.
Casey probably most fully captures a lot of my experience being a chubby chaser, in that way of like being gay and being a chaser were like two unknown quantities. He has this great metaphor, Casey does, where he says, if you think of them as strands of a rope being intertwined, but he says the rope is tied at both ends. So there's no way to unravel it. It's just like a single unit that you can pull the strands apart, but they snap back together again. And I just thought that was a great metaphor for how it was, at least for me and for a lot of chasers, trying to get gay and fat as distinct, but not distinct.
And he talks about this sort of, as growing up and getting into his college years, like this sort of all encompassing cognitive dissonance between the four words of I like fat men, but then fighting himself as a kid and as a teenager is trying to separate that out, like Dan was saying, like pulling the strands of the rope separate of I like men versus I like fat and I like fat men. And it just turned into this dissonance of, well, I'm just asexual. I'm focused on school right now. And trying to bury these things in different parts of the yard when really they're all interconnected. And he has a lot of really, really potent stories about that.
It totally captured my experience. It was really great. I mean, I'd say half the things that Casey wrote in this long letter are also in my book.
Yeah. And the one that really stuck out to me was when he was talking about the first time that he really, really like felt and understood that he was attracted to fat men was when he was a kid, a little kid. It was elementary school age, somewhere around 6, 7, 8, 9. He and his dad and his brother went to the pool to go swimming, and something got left behind, and so a public pool. And something got left behind. His dad and brother went to get it, and he was standing by the entrance when a man pulled up in his car, got out in his swim trunks, and he was this big, fat, beautiful man. And this like tidal wave of emotion and awe that like swept over Casey when he saw this guy get out of his car and walk past him towards the pool was, he describes it as breathtaking. The kind of admiration and awe you feel when you see an incredible painting for the first time or a striking natural landscape view from the top of a mountain. His brain just kind of shut off and all he could think was wow. And that is so relatable.
Exactly. Me too. And I think chasers don't talk about that enough. And we especially don't talk about it enough to chubs. And I don't know if it's because we feel vulnerable and goofy saying it, but telling a fat guy that you're in bed with that you were just in awe of him, like you're just gaga over him. And sometimes it's perfectly obvious to the chub that they're in the presence of but it's I think the other way to say that is I think a lot of chasers don't cop to that because it is being very vulnerable, because you are just gobsmacked by the beauty of a beautiful fat man. But I also feel like, Jesus, if chubs knew that they had that power over us, we'd be lost. So never let them know that they're that powerful.
Trevor's doing his best Jabba impression.
Yeah.
As soon as you started doing that, I started picturing Dan in a Leia outfit, which is
absolutely
it's a weird.
I mean,
combo.
that's how it is most days.
Well, and
So
go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that there is this sort of implied power dynamic that the fat person in society is without power and the thin person, the chaser, is privileged. And that's true. But in the bedroom, that tends to get reversed.
Mm-hmm.
Where the fat person is not just the object of admiration, because it has that word object in there, but something that is awe-inspiring. And the irony is that the fat person often doesn't get that. They're just living their life being fat. They're completely unaware of their godhood.
I wanted to know how that story struck the chubs in the room.
Exactly.
Oh, his
in our virtual room right now. Who Don and
well, like I said
and
earlier,
Trevor, how
Don,
did
like
that
I wanted
strike
to
you?
get the chub on the street take of what that's like for you as, a man on the street, garden variety fat guy, hearing this about you.
I'm a little befuddled by it because I don't feel that way.
Exactly.
Ever. No one's ever made me feel admired in the street. Like that's not something that's even on my radar.
What about in the sheets?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny what you were talking about as far as the power dynamic goes, where in my experience, when we get into the bedroom, no matter what our interactions were like outside the bedroom, like, friendly, chatty, straight to business, whatever. As soon as we get into the bedroom, a lot of them are just like, okay, now tell me what you want. Just, I will take whatever you're willing to give me, order me, like do whatever you want, and it's with more than a few of them. It's been such a wildly different person than I met outside the room that I get a little bit of whiplash.
Well, and it's
and I've had the opposite experience too, which was very interesting, where I did a hookup with this guy, very cute, but very like, please tell me what you want and how I need to worship you and blah blah blah. And it was to a point of subservience, right?
Yeah.
And then once we got past that point and we finished the business at hand, all of a sudden he became a normal human being again, and we actually had like wonderful conversations. He was fascinating and charming, and but not this like please use me personality that was there a few minutes ago.
Yeah, and that's I think that's part of that can also be part of another kink. That can be part of the power dynamic. That can just be personality. But I would definitely say I've had that experience with chubs where like I'm on a date with a chub and oh my God, you would think it was a friggin' job interview or an IRS audit for how unsexy this lunch or this dinner is. And luckily, and when I was much younger, my conclusion was, oh, I guess they're just not into me. And then I would find out days later that like, because they would tell me, they'd be like, oh my God, I was so into you. I'm like, well, you could have told me, you could have shown me, because there was such an asexuality going on there because we were in a public place and I look like I look and he looks like he looks. But then if we get back to the bedroom, then all of a sudden it becomes a sexual space. And I'm like, okay, hold on, Tiger. Let's be people too.
I will say like that story, the story by the pool, like I find that charming and sweet, and it actually makes me feel nice.
Yeah.
But the common reaction I had to reading a lot of these emails was actually a little negative for me, in that the common experience for a lot of these guys seemed to be that the fact that they were attracted to me caused them pain.
Yep.
And that hurts. That like, start in a place of originally thinking that, there aren't people that are attracted to me. And then finding out, oh, there are people that are attracted to me and they're being punished for it. That attraction is hurting them. It's taking in, I still haven't fully wrapped my brain around it like that.
Well, one of the things I say in my seminars is that we're all in this together. I mean, fat oppression may look different to chubs than to chasers, but it affects us both very strongly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love me a good chaser origin story. Because I feel like chasers, they either have it and it is like Casey's, where it is like, I feel like it's like Spider-Man #1 and I'm getting all these details and all these specifics, or it's like, yeah, I just kind of thought fat guys were hot.
Right. A lot of time I feel like that almost depends on the depth and introspection that a chaser is able to conjure, because I find it hard to believe. I mean, maybe this is because it's not my experience, but the whole like, oh yeah, I guess I just liked fat always, and I don't know, that's what it is. Like that I don't know, that feels evasive to me.
Well, but if you grow up in a community where gay isn't a big deal and fat isn't a big deal, then that's going to be your coming out experience about liking gay fat guys, is that it's no big deal.
It's
I don't know how common that is, but it's going to line up like that.
Yeah.
I wonder how many like just straight guys have a eureka moment for when they realized they were attracted to women.
You mean fat women or women at all?
I mean, just
women at all.
Oh, all right.
Just period. Women. Like I feel like it's the fact of our specific interests that we can remember. So, for example, I brought this up on the show before. I've asked a lot of white guys, like, what do you remember the first time you saw yourself on television?
Of course,
right? And no straight white guy does. None. I remember the first time I saw myself represented on television.
Yeah.
And like that means something. So if being attracted to women is just the baseline, there, and it's I'm just reiterating what Dan said. If it's not shocking, it's not notable.
Yeah.
So the other thing that I feel like we're just touching on this last aspect that I really wanted to get into, which was chaser relationships with chasers.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And across all of these, universally, there is no relationship. Like none of them.
Not really. No.
But Casey's response, I think, made me understand it better after having read it. Why don't we get to his response, what he says about, because we asked the question, like, do you know any other chasers? And he says this really great thing. He says, well, yeah, I know two, and then he writes thinking to himself, yeah, but Michael and Dan don't count. And he's like, oh, damn it, I guess I don't know two. And he goes through this thing about like, okay. And there's this really great rumination where his conclusion is basically he's not friends with any chasers unless he knew them first as friends and then discovered they were chasers or had a similar interest to him.
Yeah. Which is actually funny because I knew him vaguely, like in chance and passing before we started the podcast. And once we started the podcast, he and I connected and it was like, hey, this is who I am. This is who you are. But that's amazing. And I was like, oh my God, I had no idea. Why haven't we been friends this whole time?
You like fat guys. I like fat guys.
Well, and it is rather anomalous, but it is a huge deal because it's
good to have a wingman.
Well, and you can't count on it. Like, I don't know. It may be just a matter of confirmation bias, but it's pretty rare that I find another chaser out there in the wild.
Mm-hmm.
But the other problem is like, how often does that come up in a conversation? Mm-hmm. What Casey made me understand, or like the thought that he gave me, was that the reason that chasers so seldom know each other or bother with each other, frankly, because, I could go on a chub chaser site and guess what? I'm not talking to a lot of chasers. Or actually maybe I am because I'm kind of in the business of talking to chasers and chubs, but very few other chasers know other chasers. And I was thinking why is that so different? Because Casey brings up the fact that like gay guys know other gay guys. Like it's not about that. But I was thinking that the difference is that, if I go out to a bar with my gay friends And one of my gay friends knows another group of gay guys. Now I become friends with those gay guys. And now I have a whole circle of gay friends, and maybe we always go to that bar, and the acquaintances I know, or you go to work, like, you work with this guy in a writer's room, and now you know him, and you know his other friend, and maybe you know his girlfriend, and your circle sort of naturally expands in that social milieu. But as a chubby chaser, the only time this comes up is when we're online. Like, the only other chasers I know is because we know each other through a particular chub. I know Michael because of Trevor.
Right.
I know Don because of Michael. And so it's very much mediated through the chub, such that we don't have an environment where chasers just meet each other by accident. We only meet each other through a particular context, and that context is usually trying to hook up with a chub.
Yeah. I think that it just becomes defined by what you're looking for is supposed to be this secret thing, even though it really shouldn't be, but that's still basically how it's treated. And so you go look for it in ways that are fairly private, like online. And that creates these one-to-one interactions instead of, like Dan was saying, like going into a social setting. And as we've established, the chasers are out there. They're just in hiding. They don't have a sign on their head that says, "Hello, I'm a chaser." And so you're not socializing with a bunch of other chasers. You're socializing with a chub who might tell you about another chaser. I mean, the only thing that I can bring up as a counterpoint to this, which I don't have any personal experience with, would be chub chaser events.
And
I've never been to one.
Well, there's two things to say there. At a large scale chub chaser event, you still have one way to describe. If you've ever been to a chub chaser event, it's a lot like dating on a game show.
Oh boy.
Well, it can, especially if it's a massive event. Like if it's a massive event, like say Bigger Vegas, where you literally have 800 to 1,000 guys there. And in the back of everyone's mind at some level is getting laid. Like that is, I don't know if it's job 1 or job 3, but it's not job 107.
Sure.
So there is this other thing where one of two things happens. Either the chasers become just blinded by headlights because most chasers have never had the experiencing of managing more than one chub at a time. Like you date a chub and you're with him, or maybe you're kind of dating a couple of chubs, but two, and you're doing this all through online. So it's not like you're not doing it at a bar usually. Like you're not talking to two chubs. So their experience at an event is, this should all go into an event show. But my point is, very seldom are the chasers hanging out with each other unless they establish this little wolf pack of chasers. And I've seen it happen where they're all talking to each other. None of the chubs dare approach. They're all talking about the chubs. And it has this eerie sort of, I don't know, predator prey environment where you've got,
it's a wolf pack and I'm an elk.
No, really, it's like you've got the herd of sheep and the wolf pack, and they're deciding who to pick off.
Of course, go with elk instead of sheep. I'm going for a majestic antlered beast, and you're sticking me in a pen with wool.
I'm saying they're not in a pen, although they are. It's called the hospitality suite. Anyway, but my point is that the other side of that too is the chasers are scared to death because guess what? The chubs are also huddled together. I can't tell you the number of times I can't make a move to ask a chub out at one of these events because they're all herded together, and I can't have a private conversation with one. And it really sucks to go, I'm interested in you, but not your other two fat friends. That's a horrible conversation to have to do.
I will say that in these little chub huddles, there is exchanging of like kind of
info,
personal experiences, and kind of gossip, and oh, he said I was his first too.
Oh boy.
Like stuff like that, where it's like, especially with like this wolf pack that forms. There's a lot of analyzing and discussion of breaking down that wolf pack and like a sharing of notes.
Yeah, but at the other end of the spectrum, I have met chasers at these events where I talk about this one guy in my book where it took him 3 times at an event for him actually to talk to a fat guy. First time he went to the event, he just stayed in his room the entire weekend. But then he came back.
Man.
He came back the next year. Second time, he planted himself behind the potted plants against the wall and watched everybody. That was the second visit. Third time, he actually worked up the nerve to talk to a fat guy, because fat guys for him are just such magical, amazing creatures. Now, they're human beings, but when you've got this much pent up longing and this much inexperience, that's how that occurs.
You know what? I'm going to disagree with Dan on this one. We are, in fact, magical beings. We should be treated as such.
Hey, I'll go with it.
Okay?
I'll go with it.
Let's be very clear on that. I am an elk, not a sheep. So there's one thing just to bring up real quick about this, which is I feel like community brings thought, community brings action, community brings people together.
So true.
And if chasers are sort of being scattered around, not connecting to each other, only connecting through the chubby guys, it's hard to build a community when literally half of that community is just orbiting around the community.
Mm-hmm.
So Chubs, it may be in our best interests to actually see if we can find ways to help chasers meet each other. Not just for community, but because if you really want that awesome three-way, you got to make sure that they're comfy with each other.
Are you saying, Don, that the elk need to herd the wolves?
Yes. God damn it, yes.
Well, I don't think that's a terrible idea. I think I'm just trying to imagine it pragmatically, how a chub would do that and what would make it appealing to the chaser. Because the chaser is going to hear this as an invitation to a three-way or a comparison competition. That's the first instinct of most chasers, I think. I mean, because Michael, if you were seeing a chubby guy and the chubby guy says, "Oh wow, there's this other guy who's totally into me too. You should meet him."
Well, obviously, you shouldn't introduce two chasers to each other simply because they're both attracted to you. That's a terrible idea.
But that's how you know them.
But for example, I'm a big geek, right? I love role-playing games. I love comic books. The chasers I connect with tend to have those same interests.
All right, fair enough.
So when I bring them together to game, or to bad movie nights, that sort of thing, you can build your geek community that happens to have multiple chasers in it that now have a social lubricant besides you. And
but let me ask you that:
if I can get a little salacious with it, my first three-way was sprung on me by surprise by two chaser friends who had talked out a game plan beforehand, and the only reason I knew them both together is because of a gaming context. So. And I'll be honest, like I might not have said yes to either one of them individually, but the concept of like, oh, well, it's a 2-for-1. That sounds really exciting to me. I'll give that
I
a
don't
try.
really like anchovies, but if I get 2 for the price of 1, that makes it worthwhile.
That's unfair, actually, because they're both really incredibly sweet guys and very attractive. So
yeah, but I get what you say about it raising the stakes, it raising the excitement, and not to mention the flattery factor, which I'm not accusing you of. I've been victim to it myself of like, wow, they really want me. I should want this too.
Yeah, I admit that. And it's the only forehand massage I've ever received. So
There
that was
you
nice.
go. I don't know. We've gone on long enough, but I feel like as long as we're doing salacious, this probably will make the cut. I'm one of the very few chasers. I'm curious what you think, Michael. I am not into the idea of being with two chubs at once. That to me is a management problem. I would much rather be, because I do have that intimate relationship with chubs when I get with them. And I would much rather be in a three-way with another chaser, because quite frankly, the only way I'm going to relate to a chaser sexually is through the mediation of a chub. Like that's the only way he and I are going to really have any fun in the room, is if there's a really beautiful fat guy there to center this around.
I think my take on it would be a slightly different approach. I agree with the idea that me individually trying to manage two chubs where they're both looking at me would be a lot. But I think it would have to work where all 3 people are into at least 2 other people there. Yeah. Like, I think that's more the line that I would go, where I can't be the one person trying to keep all the plates spinning. But I think it could go either direction. It would just have to be like, yeah, I think that's more the direction I would go with it.
I feel like our chaser spotlight today needs to wrap up.
Yeah.
I'm sure we will do more chaser spotlights in the near future.
We've clearly pent up a lot of this discussion.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons why we're running long is because there's a lot more material here to go over, and we're
Yes.
just sort of skimming it. So do not be afraid. We will return to this topic at a later point. But for now, Trevor, do you have a tip for today?
Yeah. So maybe you need the shower after your little three-way we just had, and maybe that whole discussion was cut, and you're salivating for more, but you're gonna find out about this new product instead. That is the Plus Push the Plus Plush Towel, which is a wonderful oversized towel. It is 40 by 90.
It's the thick and thirsty towel for the thick and thirsty individual.
Yes.
Is this the same thing as a bath sheet?
No, this
bought a
is
few of
larger
those.
than a bath sheet.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Wow.
Would
They-
you say 40 inches by 90 inches?
Yes.
Yeah, that's massive.
I want to buy one of these because, I mean, we have some normal size towels now.
I want one just to have it. That sounds amazing.
Yes. I suggest keeping a few around your house if you are a chaser who, I mean, the plus side to a smaller towel is it doesn't cover everything, but also, there's a lot of surface area to dry. So let's be practical here.
Well, and I think this could make a very good Christmas gift for that chaser on your list.
Yeah.
Yeah, but get on it because
Yeah, this is
And
dropping
if
on
you've ever
Wednesday.
read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, you know how important it is to have a towel.
So true, Don. So
yes.
I brought a bit today that ties into one of our earlier news stories about ancient cavemen being fascinated by
Yes.
larger people, which gave birth to basically, I've got 3 questions about famous art from the past.
true. Oh, my.
Starting off with the Venus of Willendorf. The Venus of Willendorf is one of the most famous and ancient statues that has ever been uncovered. The icon of a very fat, motherly figure with a face covered by a braid or a cap of some sort has been carbon dated to about 27,000 BC. Although it has improved my understanding of ancient man by giving us revelations of migration patterns, craft skills, and possibly even an ancient trade network, its actual purpose is still actually under some debate. Which of the following uses is not something that scientists have guessed at? All right. 1, a fertility figure passed down through generations to help with, fertility. 2, a mother goddess figure of worship. 3, an early form of currency. Or 4, porn.
I go with currency.
I'm going to go with currency
I
too.
say currency.
Yeah, we talked the crap out of this thing earlier in the episode. We're like, oh, well, that just shot this question to hell. Yes, an early form of currency, although it has been posited that they were used for trade, they were not created explicitly for trade.
I have to say, I was hoping you were going to say for one of the possible answers, like cracking open walnuts or something.
Oh, I was trying to figure out a tool. At one point.
That's what
Smash
I got
the
to.
nuts open.
I started thinking about the movie The Gods Must Be Crazy. It's like, they used it to crush roots.
Yeah.
All right. Question 2. Moving forward in time. In the early 1600s, Peter Paul Rubens was already becoming a skilled artist, becoming well known for his rendering of lush, larger-than-life figures with strapping, muscular men and voluptuous, full-figured women. His delightful images have given birth to the word Rubenesque, arguably one of the few positive words used today to describe fat people in flattering terms. He wasn't just an artist, though. What other career is he also known for? 1, he was an accomplished diplomat representing Spain in the 80 Years' War. 2, he was a well-known alchemist who received large sums of money from both Spanish and Italian patrons who hoped he would be able to turn lead to gold. 3, he secretly owned a brothel in Antwerp where his prostitutes were legendary for their beauty, lushness, and, shall we say, voluptuousness.
C, final answer.
Or 4, he was a notorious gigolo known for seducing the older, voluptuous wives of noblemen across Europe, though some rumors say it wasn't just the wives he bedded.
Ooh.
Hmm.
Wait a minute. There's no Pee-wee
Ooh.
There's no Pee-wee's Playhouse option for Rubens?
There is no Pee-wee's Playhouse.
I was thinking there was going to be a sandwich option.
Oh, when he sailed to the Thousand Islands. Yes, that's right.
Yes.
That's
I'm going to say diplomat.
I am still going for C, Bravo, final answer.
There was brothel. Okay, we got a brothel owner.
I'm going to go for diplomat too. It just flags my attention.
And the correct answer is, in fact, diplomat.
Yay!
Yay.
He was Flemish-born, and he not only settled several disputes between Spain and England, but also helped settle the 80-year war between Spain and other people.
Yeah, he was older than he looked.
Last
Side note, I think my sexual awakening started with looking at Rubenesque paintings.
Oh, interesting.
Well, you might have actually had some awakenings looking at our next artist,
Oh,
who is actually still alive. Fernando Botero.
Oh, yes.
is perhaps South America's best-known artist, recognized throughout the world for his singular style incorporating rotund, whimsical figures and objects, often suffused with a subtle brand of satire. By manipulating space and perspective, he draws attention to the monumentality of his figures, showing them in spaces that seem too small to contain them. He has remained adamant that he does not paint fat people. What he paints, he insists, is volume and the sensuality of form.
Mm-hmm.
I like that answer.
Yes.
If his uncle had his way, though, Botero would never have become an artist. At a young age, his uncle enrolled him in a trade school for what trade? 1. Sewer maintenance, because he thought Botero was full of shit. 2. Olive oil sommelier, as he showed a love for all things round and juicy.
Okay.
3. Bullfighter, as he seemed to like the company of large beasts.
Oh, boy.
Or 4. Corset maker, as he had a knack for clothing the larger figured woman.
And it is actually one of these?
It is actually one of these 4 choices.
I'm going to say bullfighter.
Okay, we got one for the bullfighter.
Possible but unlikely. I'm going to go for corset maker.
Corset maker. All right.
I'm going to go with sewer maintenance.
Okay. Nobody going for olive oil sommelier. How sad. The correct answer is, in fact, bullfighter.
Trevor.
Wow.
His uncle, after Bolsonaro's father died at a very young age, his uncle decided to enroll him in a trade school, which taught him how to be a matador.
Wow.
He did not, however, complete his training when his uncle finally accepted the fact that he was more interested in drawing the bulls than fighting them.
Yeah. And bullfighting or tauromachia is a huge theme in Botero's art.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
And you can check out everything we talked about in this episode at a few of these places I'm about to mention. We're on Instagram and Twitter as @BigFatGay, @BigFatGayPod. We're on Facebook. Michael's shaking his head. We're on Facebook
Every time.
as
Every
the
time.
Big Fat Gay Podcast. Leave us 5 stars there. Leave us 5 stars on Apple and Stitcher. Leave us an Apple review. We haven't gotten any in a while. I said this last week too.
Yeah. Although I will say 2 people left ratings, which are much appreciated. Reviews, even better.
Yeah, even if you don't want to leave us some actual words, click the damn review button, people.
Yeah.
We need it. We live for it.
Yeah.
Um,
We're trying to take over the world, the fatosphere. Can only do that with ratings.
What are you
yes.
going to do tomorrow, Michael?
Okay, hold on. Let me
Trying
get
to
through.
take
Let
over
me
the
go.
world.
Come on. We're already at like an hour and a half. Check out the links to the articles we mentioned at www.bigfatgaypod.com. Did I say that
Yay.
right? Yeah, I probably
That was
did.
it.
You know it at this point.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you're polishing your fertility statues with your oversized towel you bought. Maybe rubbing in some of that lotion we mentioned too. And then you flip over one of the statues and it's got Don's face on it and he winks at you. And then Michael clubs you over the head with another statue. So
Look out.
Sorry, I was laughing. I wasn't looking out for the lookout.
that's what happens when you don't look out.